Okay, this is Marx Cards, a.k.a. John Yeager.
And this is Cal Cat, a.k.a. Adam Brown, or actually Adam Brown and John Yeager. And this is the audio commentary track for Starcrackers, The Sphere of Influence. Because we decided that after we did this movie, that 13 years after we did the movie, we wanted to finish it. And then now 7 years after that, we finally got around to doing a commentary track. So here we are doing a big Buku box set, triple dipping for you fans out there. Yeah, this is the definitive finished copy, and it is awesome. And we're hearing it on our new sound system, so it really sounds great. And most people don't have that, so they left out. But 3.1 surround sound, pretty awesome. And we have it in 720i. We tried it in 1080, and it didn't really work too well for some reason. This is 720, but it's still good because that's really what it was native broadcast anyway, broadcast quality.
And one thing we're going to cover during this commentary track is that the making of this film was not only incredibly convoluted, but probably more fascinating than the actual finished film. Which, as Adam was saying, the film took 20 years. Oh, there's Jim Buffkin with 3 Fs. Yeah, well, you know what? It's part of the canon now. His name is Buffkin. But, this film took essentially 20 years to finish, mostly because it really was our first attempt at a feature-length film. We'd done little fan films for Star Trek using like paper cutouts and whatnot, but this was easily our most ambitious project at the time, and we really didn't know anything at all. Nothing. We had no idea how to make a movie. We had seen movies was basically it, and so we were sort of making up the art of filmmaking from scratch, and you can definitely tell when you watch. A little rough around the edges, but to me, that's really part of the charm. And it took about 2 years, as I recall, to do principal photography and post-production on what we thought was the finished cut of the movie, but as I'm sure Adam can elucidate here, was not finished at all.
Oh. It's great looking back on that, and yeah, I know there's a lot of mention of the mechanics of what we did or couldn't do on the other commentary features, and going over this, I've been over this on some of the other tapes, but it's like yeah, we didn't know what we were doing really to go on with Marx or John here. We didn't have any idea what we watched a lot of Star Trek, and John watched a lot of our house movies, and we figured we could write dialogue. That's easy enough, and all we need to do is get girls in it, and whatever. The problem is we couldn't get girls, so we were the girls, and Tim and Jim were all, we're not gonna play the girls. I was like, oh dude, I'm not gonna do that. You're gonna dress up like a girl. It's like, and it's like. So we based the characters on people we knew from high school and used their names. I don't think we intended necessarily to say this guy is our teacher, Steve Clark from Pine Hill. We just stole his name and put it in the movie. As far as I can tell, Mark's Cards is nodding. Azloth isn't based on anybody. Interestingly enough, the name Azloth, I looked it up on the internet. Apparently the name Azloth is also used in World of Warcraft, although I don't think World of Warcraft existed 20 years ago. So it's a Scandinavian-sounding name. It just sounds cool, so whatever. I don't think that since he's not an actual character, he's some person's name in... It probably doesn't matter. It's a surname. But we didn't know even that. So there you go. Here's Azloth.
Hello, I would like a bowl of water.
I can vouch for that. The Azloth, his name was not based on anything other than we needed a cool alien-sounding name for this dog guy. You can't tell from the film because there was no way in hell we could pull this off, but Azloth, as written, was a dog. He was basically an anthropomorphic German Shepherd, kind of like the Mog from Spaceballs, but more dog-like. Kind of like a werewolf, except very non-threatening and completely unaggressive. But yeah, his name, pretty much every name in the script was either a complete, fiction that we just made up, or, like Adam was saying, we stole them from people that we knew, including Steve Clark. Steve Clark, really, really nice guy. One of my favorite teachers that I ever had in junior high. And I'm sure we stole his name because we liked him. He was one of the cool teachers at Pine Hill. There were a couple whose names we probably shouldn't mention, but I can say I did not play Colonel Clark as Steve the teacher. That wasn't in my mind at all when I was playing him. I was playing him sort of as this amiable goofball, sort of mock serious, except not really captain. The joke is basically he's like the opposite of the Star Trek captains, who are all very competent and clearly graduated top of their class and seem to have really smart decisions and snappy responses to every situation that comes up. And Clark is basically not that. He's the opposite of that. And not only that, he doesn't particularly care, I don't think, that he's not a particularly competent captain. And I'm sure Adam can discuss how he approached his roles.
Because, as you know, if you're going to do commentary track, as we did with our Trans-Tech saga, you got to get candy, food, and lots of soda and stuff and crap to drink, so that you'll be really hyper. But since both of us are suffering from a bit of too much food that wasn't agreeing with us, let's just say that we're not going to do too much of that on this tape because it could be a disaster. So it's funny that, Marquette here. Marquette is our name. It's Mark's Cards in Calcat. We basically took his name and made it Marquette Thompson. We've got Sergeant Schmidt. Schmidt is a name stolen from the Jung Swan people who are competent at the time. Because I liked Hillary Schmidt, this girl. And I basically stole her dad's name and used it as his character. That's where he comes from, Dan Schmidt. Which is pretty funny. Those people, ironically enough, had left Jung Swan by the time the movie was done, back in 92. So they were gone. Even 91, they probably were gone before the movie started, even. But, no, Schmidt. We did stuff like that we just threw in these characters. And, yes, the Therian surf juggling. I find it interesting that this was supposed to be special effects. I think I mentioned this on one of the other commentaries, but this is the movie one. That we thought it would look cool to film the bottom of this pool as part of the sphere thing, but then later made the sphere effects red, so the bottom of the pool is blue, and we didn't have the technology to change the color in the background. And that too, it doesn't really look like a liquefied alien sphere thing. We had technology from the 90s. We had technically late 80s, as you saw the old Apple II in the opening scene there. We didn't have any of this more advanced technology that came around. The internet did not exist. We didn't even have Macs. John, I think you had a Mac for a while, and my sister had a Mac later. We couldn't even translate the old storybooks this movie was later based on until later in the 90s. When I was able to do that. And so we had these models in front of this pool back then on these wires, and they fall in the pool because we're screwing around with them, and they went in the pool. And that was it right there, And it's like, of course, we couldn't use any of the footage, and we destroyed our first models, so we had to rebuild them and put them in there later, which was funny. I think at the time we were like, oh, my God, no. There were any numerous times in which we just completely, I don't know what, but it was fun.
Well, one of the things that's really awesome about this final cut of the film, and I want to go on record as saying I don't normally condone filmmakers going back and pulling a Lucas and like screwing with an early film and fixing it and putting better effects and re-editing and taking guns and turning them into walkie-talkies and what all. The difference between pulling a Lucas and what we've done with this film in its final edit, which is substantially different from the original cut, is quite simply that the movie never was finished. It wasn't done. We had neglected to film certain things. There were other things that we thought we were going to go back and shoot later, and we just never did. There was other stuff. It was in the script, and we would look at each other like, how are we going to do that? And like neither of us, we just sort of both shrug at each other like, I don't know, maybe we'll just, fudge it with something cheaper. And so, yeah, the inside of the sphere, to go back to that, the idea being that the bottom of Tim's pool looked really awesome. And like when you were standing over it with the light shining on it, we thought, hey, that looks like the inside of the sphere. And we'll suspend the ships on, and you won't see the coat hangers for some reason. You just won't. And so, we're standing on the edge of the pool trying to pull this off. And, of course, as you could see from the footage that is in the movie, you could see the edge of the pool. You could see the hangers. You could see the hands holding the hangers. And there's me with this. This scene actually makes sense. This is another fix. This scene, as originally put together, you couldn't tell who was talking or why. But and the apple scene. This was okay. The apple scene. This was. There was this thing that we had going for the longest time where everything that happened on Star Trek The Next Generation was something that we had been talking about the week prior. And literally the thing with the apple was an improv on the set, and the next week Captain Picard did it on an episode of Next Gen. And at that point we were pretty much convinced that whatever in the hell we were doing, like Paramount was spying on us. I'm still not half convinced of that to this day. So the fix about the sphere and a bunch of other stuff in the movie too is, and this was Adam's innovation, was there's a gag in there about Therian surf juggling, which was a throwaway gag. We never saw it. We never shot it. It was just, this little thing that he was annoyed about doing. And Adam did this brilliant thing with the editing where now the crappy substandard special effects footage of the sphere is the Therian surf juggling, and it's the play within a play, like Shakespeare. No, and it's so much funnier. It's like the sort of gag that like it took 20 years to percolate, but now it's finally there, and it's way funnier than what we did.
This is one of these scenes that was even in the 2005 print. You're going to see that on this box set too. Even there, this wasn't right. Now this is finally right. We have. Even on Photoshop 3, which was our old one, Photoshop Element 3, we recut this. Even there, it didn't really work. Here on this print, you finally get, this is Photoshop 10, which is essentially the Photoshop 10. Photoshop 3 was ripping off a little bit that Mac Final Cut thing. 10 is ripping it off even more. It's Final Cut Mac 10, yeah. So, yeah, that Star Trek episode, I narrowed that down, actually. It was a matter of time, and it was Rasmussen, and he was throwing the apple to Data. Yep. But it was the same idea, and I think Picard was in the room, and he caught it. But then it was like, I think maybe the Paramount people were thinking on the same lines that we were, because we were kind of thinking, what was cool is in Star Trek 2 when Kirk whipped out the apple, and he's like, I don't like to lose. And I think maybe we were thinking a little bit along those same lines, just as they were. And yeah, it was really weird and eerie. And they did it again too. They had a Q episode where Q was tossing a tennis ball up and down in the shuttle. And it's like, oh my gosh, guys, come on. And then in the new J.J. Abrams movie, my brother and I went to the premiere of the new J.J. Abrams movie, and there was this scene where my brother at this point in the movie, about halfway through the new Star Trek thing, my brother had already moved away to sit somewhere else because I was so hyper about this movie. It was only a couple of years ago, but I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, oh my God, new Star Trek. Ah! Bones on the screen. Ah! Kirk and Spock. And Robert said, I'm going to go sit over there and pretend I don't know you through the rest of the movie. So he gets up and he walks away because that's what he would do. And so they get to the part where Kirk is like on the bridge and he's like doing the Kobayashi Maru from Star Trek 2, and he's like, ooh, and guess what he does? He whips out an apple. He's like tossing it. It's like, Abrams, you got the idea too? Come on, hire us, dude, hire us. Quit copying us, just hire us. It'll be all good. And I love the scene too.
Oh yeah, this scene was. I remember filming that. As I recall, it took us like 20 takes. One of the times we did multiple takes just because we knew that the stuff that we were shooting was so bad and had so many errors and bloopers in it that it was ridiculous. Here's more footage that was kind of spliced in to give atmosphere to the planet, because we never shot any exteriors. It was like, we're going to the planet, and then literally we're in the backyard looking at a fence, and you can't tell that you. Yeah, and so that was from. The way that this has all been sort of shot, and to give you an example of how really haphazard and just disastrous the filming, the original filming of this stuff was. Some of there is dialogue in here, scenes where one person is talking, then the next person is speaking 6 months later, and then we cut back to that person, and they're saying the next line, which was shot 3 weeks prior, and then we cut back to that same person talking again, and it's 2005. And so some of this dialogue literally took 20 years to film, like a 4-line back and forth. That's how long this movie took. That's how completely hosed our filmmaking methods used to be. I'm pleased to say, if you've seen any of the Transtech movies, and you will eventually see the upcoming in-production Star Trek Chimera, we're way the hell better at filmmaking. It's
Star Trek Chimera this was basically years ago when we were in high school and you were in junior high. It was junior high and high school together. It was a school for kids with learning disabilities. And so there were even little kids on the other side of the quad. But we were all together, so I was, in 9th grade and you were in 7th grade. And we thought of this as shut up. Yeah, the kimchi scene there. It's like kimchi with a tacky fizz. Great. And like commented on this and the infamous blooper and all that, and they handle this Missy. And so Star Trek Chimera was one of our was basically our Star Trek parody Silly Trek that we decided to redo, and then 2005 print there with him actually saying the line. See his acting was so much better like 13 years later. He could actually carry that line. We did this scene over like 15 times. He could not say Josh Braun with the Starship. Oh yes, the infamous barf scene. We mentioned this on the other commentary, but please do.
This is one of my greatest filmmaking regrets of my life. This will haunt me to the end of my days. It was one of the greatest bloopers ever, where Adam, in character as Kimchi, has ordered this horrible fizzy drink, which was warm orange juice with a little Coke mixed in it, which for some reason we thought would make it fizz. It did not. And he's slamming this thing down. I mean, he's chugging it way faster than anybody should normally drink. And he horked it. He stands up and it was almost like a deliberate maneuver. He was so forceful. It just slams the drink down, stands up and goes, and just hurled. And Tim is there, and he like backs up, and he's just like, oh, because his channel of puke is flying out. And it was fucking hilarious. And I hit the off button the moment I realized he was going to hurl, because it's like, oh, well, that's not in the script. That's a mistake. It was like, oh my God, what an idiot I was for cutting out one of our greatest bloopers ever because it wasn't good enough. It was like, what did I think the rest of the footage was? I was 17 or 18, and I just trying so damn hard to be a perfectionist. There's my Lugosi impression. That's actually an outtake that, once again, Adam decided actually kind of fit in the movie. And I'm so glad that he put all of that stuff in there, because the movie is really, for the first time in 20 years, you can actually watch it. And there's our F-bomb. We just earned our PG-13 rating. And that's so the sort of thing. We wouldn't have put that in the script back in the day because we were kind of like, oh, we can't have swearing or whatever. But you know what? I could see Clark saying that. Just, he's a very casual captain. He's so not Picard.
Yeah. Okay, we are not actually making fun of Rachel Uffer here, who was another Pine Hill student. We just threw the name in there because, again, we stole the name. I was saying earlier about the Silly Trek thing, our role-playing game that we did, and how we did Star Trek role-playing games and stuff. I'm thinking we were just on the same wavelength as Star Trek was, because we came up with a lot of stuff they did and ended up doing Star Trek parodies and stuff and doing stuff over again. And I've even met some former TV actors and Star Trek people and stuff that actually were up there on some of the Star Trek stuff. And they said, yeah, it was a lot of fun doing it, but a lot of work and really hectic and stuff, and and that kind of thing. And but yeah, fan fiction is awesome, and there's a lot of fan films out now, because now we have the internet and we have a way to express. They have the YouTube and those other channels, and there's ways to put your fan films out there, including your Transformers or whatever you want to do, Star Trek, G.I. Joe, whatever. And so now there's this other avenue out there, expanding beyond the realm of what we couldn't do before, and just writing stories and putting them down. So we wrote a 30th anniversary, originally 2006, would have been 40th anniversary of Star Trek script called Star Trek Chimera, based on some of our fan fiction, which we'd been working on, and which some of my friends from the church group who were Star Trek fans were into. And we made I put together a script with John, and for an awesome Star Trek story, basically taking the premise of the last Next Generation movie and saying, well, what happens if we did Star Trek, the next Star Trek movie? Let's make it epic and incredible and big and awesome. And John was all like, you know what we should have? The universe should be ripped apart by something. Destroy the universe, tear it apart, and then at one point, Q should show up on the bridge, and Picard should be all flustered, and he should be like, oh, it's you. You're behind this. I was like, yes, we need to write this. So I began writing this thing, and in late 2006, I was done with it, and I said, hey, we're going to write this. And then I went to the guy that was on an episode of Babylon 5 and briefly on E.T., and we did some Star Wars, but he was like, got to watch some Star Trek episodes get filmed because his brother-in-law, Joe Karizman, was on was one of the costume designers under William Ware Thies on Next Generation. So we had all the costume things. He knew all about that. The stories and the Karizmans were big in Hollywood at one point. And Joe Karizman's got his own fanfic called Excalibur, which should be coming around the same time as Chimera comes out. So we're kind of racing toward the interest of a fanfic. Cal Cat may be writing for Star Trek Excalibur, which would be really cool. Hey, it's cool. It's awesome. That'd be awesome. So, but we're also doing our own. Star Trek Chimera looks awesome and cinematic. It's Silly Trek the way we envisioned it. It's cinematic. It's in high def. It's like action figures instead of people. Yeah, widescreen. And we're shooting it like a movie. It looks like a Star Trek movie with action figures, unlike just about everything you see on the internet. Little 5-minute clips of things. Some people are clever, but it's like sort of like Robot Chicken, but we're making a movie out of it, with the characters doing a whole Star Trek spoofy kind of, like mixing Next Generation, Voyager, and Deep Space Nine, and just go all out and have. Of course, you got to have Q, because you got to have Q. And as I was discussing it with one of the Chimera fans years ago, and I don't need to mention all the names because you wouldn't know who they are, but Amanda. So we were discussing the Q and what Q is like, and how like Q would do weird, omnipotent, silly, goofy things, and she said, Q is not really omnipotent. He just thinks he is. He only got an IQ of 2005. There you go.
Yeah, the way I figure it, you're either omnipotent or you're not. You can't be almost or very nearly omnipotent, as Picard said in that way. It's like, no, you can't be very nearly infinite. You either are infinite or you're nowhere near infinite. But I was going to say something in addition. Oh, yeah, so I was going to say, with regard to the technology of the filming of this, part of the reason that it looks so grainy and you can hear that sort of hiss in the background, you kids out there won't realize this, but old VHS movie cameras, a lot of them used a full-size cassette tape, meaning that the box of the camera was almost the size of a VCR, and you would open it up and it would go like clunk. And yeah, this was a mini cassette, but there were other cameras that used a full-size.
Bastardized Super 8.
Yeah, it was like an imitation Super 8 design from Japan, and so. But yeah, back in the olden days, when we were children, when we were making movies, you used, unless you were a huge spender and had like a top-of-the-line $10,000 camera, everyone's home camera weighed like 5 pounds and had this giant motor in it to run the recording heads. And so everybody's home movies from this era has this sort of hiss, which, you could remove in post-production if you had a studio, but we didn't. So this is the look and feel of old-school shot on VHS movies. And I was thinking about it, while we're watching this. It's like there are pocket cameras that, 10-year-olds are carrying around today that have more sophisticated technology than anything we could have even imagined. It's almost kind of like we're living in the future. It's like Star Trek, or Star Crackers anyway. Except in Star Crackers, they would probably still be using the giant clunky VHS tape cameras for whatever reason, especially Azloth. I'm sure he has one.
Which quite amused us. That was actually the camera we had. Ironically, was still around and not really working so much anymore. When I launched my YouTube channel, The Cal Cat Show, in 2007, we decided for the opening scene that we would launch that camera off the back steps and film it careening down across the backyard to its death, just to prove, look, our old 25-year-old KTS camera, look, just like the one from Back to the Future, is now going to die for art. And we went and chucked it out the window. And the stupid thing shuts off as it's flying through the air and goes. The front end goes. But it was awesome. 2 seconds of pure awesome.
You know what was really interesting about that was I was on the ground floor filming with a much smaller camera. This thing flew like 50 feet through the air, impacted in the ground from a second story. Yeah, it messed the camera up. It was totally hosed. And yet, it still worked. We were able to do a second take. It was totally not going to look good, but we instead of throwing it, we simply dropped it with the tape still recording. The lens was still intact. We just dropped it straight down, and the damn thing still shut off. So there must be some weird physics thing, like when a camera's in one of those old cameras is in free fall, it just turns itself off for some reason. But now some of this stuff was shot in 2005 on a newer but still using tape camera. None of this is digital, and that's the difference. When you watch Chimera, it's all digital and it looks way slicker. The 2005 was a VHS-C.
So this one was like the 2005 footage was like, and all of the special effects on this. This stuff is VHS-C with a 1 hour, basically 8mm tapes. And 8mm tapes are basically the videotape version of Super 8, but with sound. Which is funny because there was a movie called Super 8 that just came out, a big Spielberg actioner. Our generation really got a kick out of it, but my little nephew's generation hadn't a clue what's going on because it's like action, but what the hell is a Super 8 camera? Hey, Dad. Yeah, exactly. And like, he's like 11. So it's like, I think it's clever that we used the cheap special effects footage on the computer screen in that shot. That was cool. That was pretty cool. We did that a lot in the new one, in the 2005 one. So I used it as much as possible. It's heading this way. Yes. And like Super 8 has a couple of scenes in it that are hilarious. I was almost laughing in the theater because I had one of those things. Right out of that movie, we had a Super 8 camera of the type the kids have when they film the train wreck. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, no sound, shaky video, didn't move too fast. When that thing hit the ground, it would have been off. It would have been broken and not working anymore. When they dropped it, it would have been dead. And they wouldn't have got any train footage at all. And if they did, well, anyway, so let's just assume they managed to get some train footage. There would be no sound. Super 8 camera in that time period didn't have a soundtrack on it yet. The movie takes place in 1975 or 76, somewhere around there. They didn't have sound on them until 1980. So, yeah. And now, if the kid's older friend who films the rest of the movie did have sound on his, it was probably piped in on an audio track, which they kind of addressed with some of the other scenes. But still, that would have been a little weird that the audio would have even been synced up right, because these are kids doing this. These are kids younger than us. If we did this with a video camera, trying to make a space movie now, and we're just like, a little bit, I guess, clever, average, and a little bit kind of strange. I mean, like, how could they have even done that in like rural America? They couldn't have. And then they go into the alien lair, and they go not the alien. They go into the lab, and they find the guy's like 16 millimeter film, and they somehow sync that up with his audio tape track and play that of his like lab report. How the hell did they find that stuff? That's just. And it's like, this is a big budget movie. I mean, I liked it and everything, but there was just some interesting oddities in there.
Yes, and now you have a capsule review of Super 8 on our commentary track. Although, no, that's right. Yeah, that's kind of funny, actually.
Just illustrating how they were making a movie.
Yeah, but that brings me to an interesting point, too, which is Super 8 and other movies like it are basically the filmmakers doing this sort of homage to the stuff they grew up enjoying, and that's exactly what this movie is. Yeah. This is us paying homage to not only Next Generation Star Trek, but also classic Trek, which was still in rotation when we were kids. I actually, one of the things I would do after school, in grade school, I would run home and watch. I had this little block of TV. It was like a couple of cartoons, and then there was classic Trek. And I watched it unironically. I didn't care that it was from the 60s and some of the effects were kind of rubbery and cheap. I loved those stories. And so like I hadn't seen they've done a special edition. Speaking of messing and pulling a Lucas, they've put out classic Trek with like better effects, and I don't want it because I didn't grow up with that. That's not my childhood. It's one of the things I think any young, creative person, and anybody can be creative. Everybody's, I can't possibly write a story or do a picture or something. And no, anybody can. Anybody can express themselves creatively. And one of the best ways to do that when you're young, you don't worry about being the next Shakespeare or Spielberg or what have you, because obviously we weren't. What we were doing was basically imitating what we liked, and that's where things like fan fiction and fan stories and role-playing games and all of that stuff, don't be embarrassed to do that kind of thing, even if you're just you ass. Don't be embarrassed about writing a story that's basically a ripoff of it's a good way of figuring out the craft. And don't try to sell it. Don't try to make a DVD and sell your Paramount copyrighted thing. Although this doesn't actually contain any copyrighted material. It used to, and I'm sure Adam can talk about the original. That was better than our original soundtrack choice.
Yeah, I think what's funny is some of these scenes where you see like an earlier grainy movie thrown in there, that's going to be on this DVD set, which is free as well. It kind of still would have to be free, but no, this is actually these characters and names, the situation, the title, all that is pretty much copyrighted by On Location, Valley Stories, Adam Brown and John Yeager, Slick Otter. So all of the stuff that's originally ours, yeah, you can't steal it. So yeah, sorry, it's ours. Yeah. So yeah, just ask to work for us. So these earlier scenes are actually from a pre-movie of this movie, in which we had seen, and this movie is partly inspired by this. We had seen the finale of Next Gen in June of 1990, May of 1990, in which they had the Borg had captured Picard, and they were going to blow up the Borg ship. And Riker comes out, and he's all like, "Ready, Worf? Fire!" And so we were like, "Ooh, that would be really cool as a story." So originally, we were kind of ripping that off. We were like, let's do the Star Trek Borg thing, partly because we were snarkily thinking, you know what? You guys stole our idea, because like years earlier during the Silly Trek series, which was a role-playing game at our Pine Hill, we had, long before the Borg, actually, long before Next Generation, actually, first season of Next Generation had just started, actually, we decided that at our high school, we would have these cybernetic robot zombie aliens, I'm serious, beamed down to Pine Hill to our high school, with the Star Trek people there, too, because they were there with us, of course. And they would be down there with Kirk and Spock and Bones. It was Kirk and Spock and Bones. It was before Next Generation. It was like after Star Trek 4. And the zombies beam down, and they basically assimilate Jamie Mezzi, our bully guy, and turn him into a bad guy. He goes up to the Enterprise and assimilates everyone else. And it's remarkably similar to what the Borg were doing in the Next Gen later on. And we're like, oh, well, so years later in they introduced him in 87, and then 1990, they're doing one where the Borg take Picard, and we're like, okay, they're really ripping us off now. So we rip off them. Yeah. So we like thought of this Graham Cracker Chronicles thing in 1990, and then a little sequel called The Board, which Silly Trek The Board, in which I played all of the characters from Silly Trek, running around going, "We're the Board. We're our clothing is funny, and we run around and stuff." The Board, of course, we couldn't call them the Board because they're the Borg. So I basically said, okay, let's have the alien race be the Ruxy instead. So let's have the Ruxy on the ship in the new one. And you started writing Graham Cracker Chronicle 2. That's what it was called originally, Graham Cracker Chronicle 2. And I think it was my mother and possibly my sister, snarkily, who said, Sister Martha, snarkily, going, "Why don't you do something other than Star Trek? Call it something else. That way it's not just Star Trek is stupid," that kind of thing. Even though she liked it as much as we did, she just didn't want to admit it. She liked Kirk and Spock and all that stuff, but in a different way. She liked the dudes. Riker was cute. Would you too? I know Riker. And that episode was cool. Everybody watched that. Very well fired. We're waiting for that next episode to come along and doing our own little thing. And in 1990, we were incredibly prolific, like we had been before. I was writing journals all the time in Star Trek. I was writing constantly. I could not stop writing. I was obsessed, writing everything immediately. So I come up with this story, and we start filming. And even before we started filming, we had this cast meeting in 1990 after our Deadly Hour sketch comedy, and we were going over the characters and the Ruxy and Thompson and Henderson, and Jim was all, "I don't want to play Henderson because he's a jerk." Because that's the whole point. You get to play the jerk, and then you get to make fun of him. Well, I don't get it. I don't know how to do it. And so we had the Ruxy there, and we decided about halfway through that, let's switch that around so it's Zuri. And instead of them just wearing like the Borg, they just wear funny things on their heads and their clothing and stuff, and they walk around. And John's all, what would be funny is if one of them comes onto the bridge and he's like in a bathrobe and a towel on his head, and he comes in and he's like, "I just got out of the shower, towel on my head." And what we were talking about on the commentary earlier is that this was an unintentioned like joke that could be misconstrued as a racial joke, but it isn't. He just comes out of the shower because his hair is wet. That's the only reason he's wearing that thing on his head. It's in no way religious or racial or anything. He's just, I got a thing on my head.
That's absolutely right. I still remember writing that joke. The joke was that it was completely random and silly for a space captain to have come onto the bridge without even finishing toweling off from the shower. It never would have occurred to us to put any kind of, offensive or ugly, stereotypical thing. And and Tim was Baptist, so he would have been pissed off if we had. Well, he is a Baptist, and and so I mean, we were so innocent at the time. It was the late '80s, early '90s. It's just we were trying to do this sort of loving homage to Star Trek. There was nothing mean intended, even in the use of the names of certain people that we knew. Henderson was really the only character who was supposed to actually be unlikable in the script. And that was kind of the joke, it's like the character you would never see on Star Trek, the smug, kind of sexually harassing jerk. He happens to be on the good guy's ship, but he's kind of a jerk, and he would probably fit in with Raxler's crew just fine. But, one final word on Raxler. I specifically remember he had a line where he says he's British, or part British, and part something else. And we don't even know what he thought that sounded really ominous to not even tell you. He's so mysterious or something. But yeah, there was no ethnicity implied. But Henderson was written probably with Jim in mind, but he didn't want to do it, and I'm not sorry about that because I really had a good time playing him.
The engine room. That is this room, actually, that we're filming this stuff, studio thinking. And they have blinds on the ship. That's pretty funny. It's amazing. We're like little boys in this. It's like weird looking back 20 years ago. And we're like, oh my goodness. I still have nice firm buttocks there, but yes, but yes, but there's Raxler and so I think Tim really enjoyed playing Sodre actually, and these clips in here. The reason that they're in here and we like redid some redubbing here in 2011 is because we had to, because some of this footage we decided that it would be cool. Orchestra, mostly me, decided it would be cool if we had Batman or Star Trek playing in the background on Clark's ship. So a lot of the Clark scenes are like, oh my god. You hear the Batman, and it's like, okay, yeah. And this scene is funny. This scene needed this little throwaway gag at the end. It was never filmed until 2011. It was written, but we didn't. This is the whole point of the movie. He gets it from, he helps them to solve the thing, because he's like the lovable fool, but in the back of his head somehow his mixed up brain, the dog brain, he has some bits of wisdom. Not so much a Forrest Gump, because you really don't like Forrest Gump, but more like the idea that the lovable simpleton will say some bout of wisdom right out of kind of a Shakespearean kind of guy, and he'll put some bout of wisdom out there, and the bad guy will be like, oh, well, yeah, I hadn't figured on that. And that's just what's cool about it. It's like Azloth's dumb, but he's not smart, but he's got some kind of a street smart about him. He's got a little bit of something in there that makes him a likable, common sense character. Right? Yeah.
It's funny that he's suddenly very sophisticated when he's also talking.
Yeah, you should say that.
Yeah, it was just funny to us that he's a character who drinks out of a bowl of water, and pretty much nothing he says quite connects to reality. And then, like, right in this really dramatic, confrontation scene, he just blurts out something really smart. Not like on purpose, not like, oh, they don't know I'm smart secretly. It's just like, it just occurred to him like any of his other random things. But he just says this really savvy, to-the-point thing, and it just happens to be exactly the right thing to say right at that moment. But yeah, the joke is that he's not dumb. He's just sort of on his own. His mind is in its own dimension, and every now and again it sort of intersects with ours. Yeah, he's not autistic or anything like that. He's a dog. He's got a dog mind. He perceives reality different. which is what makes it funny. And again, that's the sort of character they didn't do so much on Star Trek, except in the novels. Where they could say like, oh, the helm officer is a giant dog-like guy. Like on the TV show, they couldn't do those kinds of effects anyway. But the animated series had this cat lady who I've actually seen naughty drawings of online. But there's again, this was as much an homage to Trek as it was kind of a spoof of it. And so every character in here, like Henderson, is the jerky, sexist guy that would never be on Star Trek. He's the anti-Riker, and Clark is sort of the anti-Picard, and Azloth is, I'm not sure where he comes from. He's just this strange being who shows up to...
maybe Azloth is Barclay, who came later in the series. Maybe he's sort of that guy. Where Barclay clearly was autistic or something, too. But so was, I think Data was more autistic than Barclay, even, because Data was sort of like a robot, and I really like Data. Gee, I wonder why. Anyway, so here we have, and for the record, we're not making fun of autism. I happen to be autistic, so there you go. And John has ADD. And what's funny is that autistic and ADD, they get along because the autistic person sees little details, and the ADD person kind of loses track of the details and is confused. Goes through the big picture, gets kind of confused. So I'll be seeing all the little bits of the movie, and you'll be explaining the plot to me. But it's like, oh, we should just do that, like all the time. It's like, and even though I was recently at a job interview a job placement thing today with my mother and the job placement person, and I was thinking, my mother was saying afterward that because she hasn't read a lot of my recent stories, she still thinks that I don't understand empathy and compassion as much as other people do, or the way people work, which is true to an extent. However, I can fake it in a story, because in a story, I can mold the characters the way they're supposed to act and make it look like I can fake it. But with actual interaction with a lot of other people that are on a different wavelength or something, it's a little more difficult. But in a story, you have complete control of the universe that you're in. So that universe, you can say, oh, this person can have empathy or compassion or do something or be the lovable fool or be the exciting captain. Star Trekkers started out as a storybook series after the movies, and I wrote it for years, and I also wrote Distant Destinies, rewriting an older thing that I did called Distant Cousins, which had been Planetcom. I had always been writing stuff since I was 14 or 15 years old, and I found that we got better and better as we collaborated on stuff, as we came up with ideas, as me and my friends shot ideas back and forth to each other, and Tim too, and even Jim to an extent. Jim basically what not to do. Like make lots of boobies and tits and ships and explosions and like, okay, we won't do that, but we'll suggest it. Yeah, it's not Showgirls. Yeah, with a, but yeah, as long as if the story, and I even made some horror stories in the '90s where we basically went all out and said, well, okay, what happens if we take the Jim angle and we make it as violent and gory and disgusting as possible just to make it like awesome somehow? And we made some really twisted horror scripts, like the Mall Massacre and stuff, that were just completely, we went over the top. It was so gory and gross that it was funny. It's like, okay, it would never really happen that this evil gang takes over a mall. It was on a killing spree and is chopping up people and hurling them from escalators and hanging them from their guts and stuff. It was completely outrageous, and it had like a Bruce Willis character in it because it was the 90s. And he basically gets shot in the head with a nail gun and falls down to his death.
God, I have such warm memories of those stories too. But I think it's important to mention that, like, as sick and twisted as they sound, those stories were also meant to be comedies. They were comedy in like the sort of Toxic Avenger sort of vein where everything about them was, the joke was that it was so inappropriate and so over the top. It was basically nothing was taboo. It was just like, what horrible thing can happen, and then let's think of something that will make it worse. And it was all presented so over the top. It was like an Evil Dead movie or something. But Sam Raimi probably would have sued us for. We had always fantasized about making one of those stories into a movie, and it would have sort of been like a splatter comedy, like what Troma does. We did not have the resources or the wherewithal. I mean, you're seeing our technical abilities trying to pull off a science fiction thing. Pulling off a horror would have been equally, if not more, challenging, because there would have had to have been actual special effects and a cast and cinematography and whatnot. But we had a script that we would have. Well, filming the one in the Mall Massacre, would have been impossible. It would have required a budget of $1 million. But yeah, what we had in mind was to do, would have been like a 15-minute short film called Road Pizza. And that was, we came pretty close to actually starting planning, not pre-production, but we were trying to figure out how we could do this. It was basically this really tasteless story about a bum who lives in the creek eating roadkill, and at one point he decides to impersonate a pizza delivery guy. I forget why, but he did, and he was originally a pizza guy, and they fired him, and so he was going to get revenge by putting a road-killed cat on a pizza and delivering it. But then towards the end, he's wandering down the road and he gets run over and becomes the road pizza. And it would have been like this 15-minute, just totally gory, over-the-top, deliberately tasteless, funny thing, which we never obviously did. But nowadays, it's the sort of thing that could get made. And probably, I was talking about the technology being a lot better. You could film that movie with iPhones, and $100 worth of fake gore, and probably get a contract like those Hobo with a Shotgun guys did. They basically made our movie.
Were they related to the Hobo with a Shotgun? Was that one of the Grindhouse trailers?
Yeah, originally it was. There was a contest held not in America, but in all other countries where they released Grindhouse. There was this contest to do a fake trailer like they had done. If you saw Grindhouse, there were a bunch of fake movie trailers, and Machete was one of them. But they put out a contest saying, do a fake trailer and submit it to our website, and if we like it, we'll include it in the movie. And it was a Canadian team. They won the contest with this 2-minute thing called Hobo with a Shotgun. And having seen it, it was exactly the sort of stuff we fantasized about doing back in the day. It was just completely trashy, grungy, early 80s looking splatterfest. And it was popular enough that it spawned a feature film. And the same director did it and probably has a career going now. So, I mean, chase your dreams, even if it's just making a grungy, trashy, splattery 2-minute thing. What have you got to lose? It's fun, if nothing else. And so, like this movie, we're never going to get rich and famous with this movie, but I can't describe how awesome it is to sit here and watch it. Just like, oh my God, we're such boys. Like, look at us. We look like we're in grade school practically, even Tim. And I was just out of high. Well, actually, I think I was graduating around about the same time we were filming this. Which
it would have been. This came out in February of 1992, and you were a senior in high school when we were filming this movie. And a junior and then a senior. And it's like, wow, this was... We filmed about 60 minutes of this movie, and it was a 90-minute script. We had half an hour we did not film, and it was in the middle of the movie. There were scenes that were supposed to be filmed in the middle of scenes, and characters and lines of dialogue like Moore's here, where he should have said those lines. They should have been in the 2005 one, too. Because otherwise, some of this stuff doesn't make any sense. So we used clips from the Board movie and grafted them in for Thompson and Carey here. Grafted them in there because we couldn't use the Batman music in the background, or something else was corrupted. So that's from the board. And the board is on the DVD set if you want to watch the whole board. It's bizarre. Yeah, you can watch it. It's funny. Yeah, it's sort of... Consider the board, if you watch it, my audition tape to appear in this movie. It was basically me doing all the characters. So, good. My audition tape. Your audition tape was The Deadly Hour, but we didn't put that on this tape. No, and either did November Remember. November Remember, it was mostly you on crutches going, that's funny. That's not funny. But, the graveyard scene. There was like a tape dispenser and a fan and all sorts of funny stuff. There was a little tinfoil Enterprise, a little tinfoil Josh Braun. There was a tinfoil Galactica. I put all kinds of stuff out there, floating in the field. Also, the '80s Galactica is floating out there in space. It's dead, apparently. So yeah, there we go.
And just and there's another line. So you even with the movie more or less coherent, you probably can't entirely tell. But the concept of the sphere is that in the world of this story, there's no aliens. There's other colonies that have been around long enough to develop their own cultures, and there's these sort of like genetically engineered dog people, the Techites, but nobody's ever found any aliens yet. So it's not like Star Trek at all, where there hasn't been a first contact yet. And so this story kind of technically is a first contact story, where the sphere is, for whatever reason, and it's very mysterious, we never felt the need to explain it, it's been zooming around either the galaxy or the universe, basically vacuuming up alien crafts, and it's been sort of hoarding them, sort of like it's a space museum kind of a thing. And that's why it keeps coming after Clark and Raxler's ships, is it's adding them to the collection. And so like nobody's ever figured out how to get out of the sphere before, because all these ships are dead. That's kind of like the foreshadowing of like, we're never going to get out of here kind of thing. And that's why he keeps propelling forward, and why they finally decide to work together at the end is like, okay, the alternative is we stay here and join the ship graveyard. That was basically the original concept. Again, I don't know how much of that actually is apparent in even this finished version of the film, because again, like Adam was saying, the way we filmed it was so piecemeal and so random and so gibberish. I don't know what we were thinking, why we thought it was easier to film a 10-line back-and-forth dialogue scene months apart, with like lines 2 and 6 and 7 and then 10 on one day and then 1 and 3 on another day, and then we forgot to film the rest of them. I don't know what we were thinking. But, it's a learning curve like anything else. You have to start somewhere, and this was how we started, basically.
Yeah. The alien sphere thing. It's funny that later on an author named Alistair Reynolds, who was about my age in England, he came up with a series in which his book series called The Revelation Space. It's not really religious, they just called it that. In which there are no aliens. The aliens have been wiped out, and there's Earth colonies everywhere. And the Earth people have engineered themselves into different hybrid life forms and are running around the galaxy. Then they meet these other aliens that are being pursued by these shadow aliens. That's kind of like he's ripping off Babylon 5. But anyway, but there are some aliens in it, and they're these pattern juggler aliens. And this book series is really interesting and fascinating, hard science fiction, extra-dimensional stuff going on, and people disappearing from the dimension. It's kind of a cool book series. It's not really ripping off Starcrackers, but it's like, the idea of having there be no aliens, at least in this version of Starcrackers, is interesting. Part of the reason that I thought that we didn't have any aliens is because we couldn't make them. Because we had... And he's nodding. Because we had no... I don't know why. I was thinking of some of the commentary. Why didn't we get a werewolf mask and put it on Azloth? Even if it looked stupid, have him be a dog. So he would be a dog. Or a dog mask or something. Disneyland or something. Just have him be a dog so that he would look like... And put ears on Raxler or something. And then say, there are aliens, but they're just a few, It's just that there are no super advanced aliens, and this sphere thing has been around sucking things out of the galaxy. It doesn't want super advanced aliens, which is kind of like Alice Reynolds. And so also these Star Trek storybooks reaching 20 years are going to be redone and re-upped as publishable novels like Distant Customs and Distant Destinies became. And we're going to make a Starcrackers The Sphere of Influence novel, and we're going to publish it, put it out there probably through the Author House again, but also hopefully through short stories and stuff at actual real other places other than just self-publishing. We'd like to actually get some of my stories out there so people actually read them more than just on the self-publishing bracket, so they actually read them partly so we can go back to Baycon like we do each year and actually be able to say, hey, we published something, here's how to do it. That kind of like the other people have done before us. And it would be cool. So we could have, so in the Starcrackers reboot that we're kind of mulling over, and of course Maelstrom, the other version that's sort of like John's distant cousin's version of the whole thing. Sort of like his magnum opus of the whole deal. That too, Starcrackers is going to have aliens in the rewrite, but they're going to be different from the Distant Destinies aliens. They're not all gone. It's just that these ones where the sphere is taking them to trap them. That's a group of aliens that were wiped out. But basically, the super advanced aliens from a previous era got wiped out by the sphere builder alien guys. And the leftover aliens that they left behind, all the genetic screw-ups and everything, they left behind after the Great War, they're still around. And the humans go to colonize these planets, and they find them. And they're like, oh, you're the guys that are left over. They're sentient and everything, but they don't have much technology. So they're not able to fight the humans off if they show up on their planet. So the humans basically take over their planets, which could lead to some interesting rebellious angles and whatnot, and could lead to some interesting tension in any kind of rewrite of that. And it could be really cool. And that's something Star Trek didn't do either. And it's still going to have that whole Starcrackers feel to it. In that it's going to have, like you're going to have, unlike Star Trek where the best and the brightest are out in space and Starfleet is so hunky-dory, wonderful, super universe, and everybody's glad to be on the Starship Enterprise and all that. And that's nice once in a while. And I remember during Deep Space Nine, and we did a little for Deep Space Nine and Voyager, but I remember for Deep Space Nine, Ira Bear would always say, why is Star Trek so perfect and glowing? It shouldn't be perfect. It should be gritty and darker, and this should be the hind-end backwater of space out here where we're doing. That's kind of what we were thinking with Starcrackers a year or so before Deep Space Nine. Kind of going like, yeah, let's see the part of Starfleet where these guys are not the best of the best. These guys are space worker cop guys. They're out in space doing a job because they have to do it. They're not there because they enjoy it. They're out there because they have to do it. And they get sucked into this sphere thing, and they're like, oh, crap. Another mission where we're stuck in something we got to get out of. That's a lot cooler than I'm the perfect captain. I'll solve all the mysteries for you.
Uh-huh. And, one of the things about not having any aliens exactly like he was saying, we couldn't really pull that off. But this seems to be like in the science fiction that I write, either collaborating or on my own, is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of aliens. And it's not that I don't like aliens. It's just a lot of times introducing aliens introduces a huge amount of baggage that you have to deal with. If you introduce like 50 different alien races, maybe it's just like my anal retentive nature. I want to like build their worlds and their societies and their cultures and all that. And that's really fun, but it's not necessarily the story that you set out to tell. But I also like the idea of a first contact story. So he mentioned Maelstrom. Maelstrom, it's basically been in the works for about 23 years. The thing is, it hasn't come out yet, so you don't have this to compare it to. But Maelstrom basically is a remake of this movie, or this story. There's so many elements in Maelstrom that come directly from this original story that, it's kind of like I've been doing this story or trying to give birth to it like for a couple of decades now. But yeah, yeah, I'm watching it and it just keeps jumping out at me. It's like, oh yeah, that's Maelstrom too. So yeah, it's the concept of there not being any aliens and there's this first contact that comes from this sort of mysterious spherical alien thing. It's a black hole. It's kind of a fake black hole. But once again, it leads to a first contact scenario. There's animal races in it, like the Techite in this movie, because there's no aliens. But I wanted there to be some, interesting non-human perspectives. The spaceships are not super advanced, and yeah, the people in it are not the best and the brightest. They're, just sort of the working stiffs of the universe. So yeah, it's almost kind of uncanny now that I'm watching. It's just like, oh my god, I've already kind of mapped out how Maelstrom should go. All I need to do is watch this movie.
Well, they're kindred cousins. They're kissing cousins. We even explored that in Prospectors when we did a spin-off of Starcrackers. I did a couple of spin-offs, none of which worked too well until about 2004, in which I came back to John or Mark's cards and I said, let's do Maelstrom. Let's do the next Starcrackers. Let's actually have it be part of the Maelstrom universe. Since Starcrackers is so much like your story, let's just have an episode where I essentially come up with a season, 26 episodes, of a new Starcrackers spin-off with another crew, where they have the hybrid people and they have the whole deal with the ferret people and bunnies and things like that, and let's do a Maelstrom spin-off. And we ended up with Starcrackers Prospectors, which was a new ship and crew, and it was 2003. So I thought, okay, to be really edgy and ballsy, this is long before J.J. Abrams. You didn't think of it first. We did. Your Captain Ruafu guy, they're supposed to be like an Arab or something. Well, we made Captain Murgani sort of an Indian character, Indian-Italian guy. So we already thought of sort of a Eastern-y, Asian-y kind of guy long before you did. So there. And Ruafu dies stupidly in that movie anyway. He goes and blows himself up to die for Nero or whatever. I was like, no, Murgani would never do that. So Captain Murgani, he comes out, he's like half Indian, half Arabic, half something else. He's a mix of things. He's a twin. And he comes out and he does this Murgani thing, kind of like Carno a little bit. Carmara, I must have been thinking along the same lines. Cross-pollinating stuff. And Distant Cousins. This has a little bit of Distant Cousins in it, actually, too. There's a little bit of that in there, too. The Distant Cousins guys aren't the best and the brightest either. Eventually, they become very important because essentially in Distant Destinies, a lot of the main characters, they end up that their superiors die, thus leaving them in charge, which isn't a good thing, but it's what happens to some of them. So, so they become admirals of space eventually, but only because everyone else which is a little silly, a lot of the people else above them kind of die. I tried to be, Distant Destinies is more serious, though. It's more of a space opera, majestic space battle scenario thing. It's not really a comedy so much as a space action adventure space opera, basically. More like Star Trek, kind of. More of a Star Trek Robotech crossbreed, but it's not ripping them off either. And so what I was saying about Prospectors is we tried to do a Maelstrom, basically. An early, like it was a pre-Maelstrom. It was like a story set 300 years before Maelstrom or something, back when all this was new, and it was like 15 years after Clark and crew. So Clark and crew show up a couple times as older people, and they're all like, hey, this is the year 2315 now, or 2311 now, and isn't it interesting, And what's funny is now it is the time of Prospectors. It's 2311 technically, or 2511 is a new version, we'll say. 2611. And it's the time of Prospectors right now. It's the time of Murgani and crew. So, so Clark and crew... It's funny that we were trying to play people that were like 35 and 40 years old in this story, and we were like 20. But yeah. So this Prospectors thing was going to be a spinoff, but it got a little convoluted because we started to introduce these other aliens and stuff from other ideas and other characters, and I think it flew off the handle after a while. The first season was really good, like Starcracker's first season was, and it really worked. But I think when it started to lose its cohesion, the ideas were really cool for a while. But I think it's, San Jose State started again, so in late 2005, early 2006. And Chimera was in its final season, and Enterprise had been canceled. So I was kind of like, oh, man, I don't want to write that anymore. Star Trek is over. And then a little bit afterward, I did Chimera. But at the time, I was thinking, oh, man, this sucks. So I was just not in the mood anymore for a while there. But I think we're in the mood to go back there and do those 2 stories and do it really awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And this kind of is, putting a fire under me to really get cracking on Maelstrom, because it's one of those, it's been in the works for so damn long. But unlike Adam, who is super prolific, I wish I was half as prolific as he is, but it takes me a really long, and some of this is ADD. I'm not using that as an excuse, but if I get really into my writing, I'll write for a couple of hours, and then I literally have to get up and like wander away and do something else, because I can't focus. Like it's like nervous energy or something. Dragon Software. Oh yeah. Except I could just see all the weird crap that my half-assed thoughts would get mistranslated as.
That's true. I tried to like blog extra stuff. I was like, I'm gonna have like a video blog like all year, like in 2011, and have a video blog. It's like I thought of like 4 things to say in a video blog all year. It's like no, it's much better when you're doing like online video stuff. I found that during the rehash of Valley Stories that's now on the internet, that's coming soon and everything, in Calcat show, that a video blog, I noticed that really does not work, because you just can't think of, I mean, you just ramble on, but you just can't think of, like, on a blog about, like, daily life is generally boring. So you can't really, it's really hard to come up with really interesting stuff to talk about constantly. So yeah, if I'm like blogging a storybook like on Dragon or something, I don't have Dragon, my brother does, because his hands are messed up. He's got to do the thing with all of his, he's got to do it manually. But so he was born with a hand thing. But but he was a psych nurse, and he really smart, so he can do the Dragon software. Oh yes, the Coma Scene. This was never finished, and now it is with clips from elsewhere, and some of it fits weirdly enough. She's coming out of her coma, and she's like tripping out. I think she was supposed to be Chris or Libby from Pine Hill, that's who we were thinking of, but she's called Sarah. And we named my niece after her, but not. We didn't think my niece was going to be crazy. We just thought, funny. Actually, Martha would deny that. She said, "No, Sarah comes from Zara, Ian's mother." No, we named her after this character.
So it's pretty awesome that like all of this stuff was behind the scenes outtake stuff, and now it's actually not only in the movie, but it belongs there. Like it's part of her just. This is Sarah's like psyche just spewing random gibberish at her, and it's like she's hallucinating Clark making out with a lobster, and kind of a John Waters reference, I suppose. But yeah, it just goes to show you that like it took 20 years to put all of this together in a finished version that makes sense and is enjoyable. We could never have pulled this off back in our original cut. Even if we had shot everything, the movie would still have been gibberish, because we just didn't have the know-how to do it right. It's finally, this is like, the Blade Runner 5th and final cut or whatever. And there's my Elvis, apparently. Yeah, I know. Very convincing. Vacuum cleaner used as a space prop. Oh, I think, I must have been doing Lugosi. Apparently I was really channeling like Ed Wood or something, which is very appropriate. This is an Ed Wood movie. It really is.
And what's funny is there's a half hour more after this movie is over where there's partly a commentary track from 2005 on here. And then there's a bloopers reel on here. And we're going to keep going through the commentary track of the commentary, talking about the movie. So that'll be bizarre, because we got to fill up the whole tape with the commentary, I would think, because otherwise it would be weird if it just stopped, wouldn't it? At the end of the movie. About a half an hour, because the movie's 90 minutes. The movie's 90 minutes, but the commentary and the other thing are. We did on Transtech. Well, maybe we can't come up with more. Do you think that'd be all right? Oh. Well, if we can think of anything to go on about for another half an hour. I don't know if we can. So we're coming to the end here, and, well, pretty soon, but. Oh, I thought there was another hour. No, half an hour. Yeah, the movie's 90 minutes, and there's a half an hour of bonus features. The bonus features are on the end, so we're going to bonus features. And then, yes, are you all right? Well, you didn't film that quite right, but it's because we had this really confined space. We didn't have a sick bay. That was a bedroom, a really cheap one. We didn't have the other bedroom, or we would have filmed it in there. If we had I don't think we had a cat back then. It was 2005. The cat Quark wasn't in the house, I don't think. Ah, the dog. Yeah. Huh. Maybe Floyd. It was way before Floyd, though. I wonder who it was. That was recently, wasn't it, though? Maybe, maybe Dirk came over and barfed it back there. That'd be funny. Maybe. Because I know there was plenty of weird dog stuff during the other stuff here with Tim. We didn't, or at Tim's house. Yeah, a lot of that footage that we filmed it. We had two. We could talk about where we filmed some of this stuff. Yeah. When we had a lot of the Tim's basement stuff, we were filming at Tim's house in his his backyard and his kitchen because it looked better than mine, and the basement. And we filmed Raxler's ship and some of the exteriors of our ship in the basement. The basement later became the bedroom for his brother and his then wife, his brother and his wife, and then they later then Matt later divorced his wife and moved out and then divorced. Later, Tim moved in with Jim, moved into the basement downstairs with Tim, and that was a disaster. That ended a year or so later. Then other things happened, and life went on, and Tim got married in 1999, and he doesn't have any children, but he's married, and he has furry kids, he said. He has a couple of dogs, Chihuahua Terrier mixes, that are insane. Those dogs are nuts. They're like, ruff, 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 ruff. They just will not shut up. They yap all the time. Yapping dogs. That's Chihuahuas. They're very noisy. Ew. And it's funny that that looking back on we used the living room set was the living room. That piano got moved because it was done over like 2 or 3 weeks. They moved it into the kitchen. There was all the sets were done by me and my sister Martha. She did the sets. The console and all that stuff, and I think we discussed some of that on some of our other tapes, but doing that was interesting. Also, in 1990, Tim and I took an art class, 1991, and he did some of the set stuff too, because it was a weird art class, because like we had this stuck-up art teacher that's like guest of our teacher. Our teacher wasn't stuck up. This lady that came in, and she lectured everybody on how their sculpture sucked. And she was like, what the hell? She comes into these like students that are like 18 years old. She walks into the art class and says everybody's stuff sucks. It's like, what kind of a person is this? Like, she thinks she's so awesome. Like, I've seen modern art in like sculpture museums, and I'm thinking, like, what the hell? You know, some of that stuff, the guy just slapped it together and said, my name is awesome. I put a turd and I gelded it, and I put it out there, and now I'm making money on it. Because that's how dumb people are that buy our crap. It's like, so this lady was like full of crap, and she's all knocking Tim's rudimentary art skills. He's painting his little painting thing. He was kind of miffed about it. And I had made this big elaborate lizard thing with this space thing going on, and because I've been drawing and putting paintings and pictures and stuff since like 4 or 5 years old. I'm kind of gifted that way. That's how the doctors knew that before they could discover I wasn't physically and emotionally there. They thought I was going to be retarded or something. My mother said, "No, he's not." And then I started to draw stuff. I couldn't articulate stories and things when I was a little kid, but I could draw really well. Like other little kids would draw like their little like stick figures and houses and things, with the chimney be going the wrong way, the roof be the wrong way. I was drawing a detailed picture of the house with shingles, chimney going straight up, and roof vents on the house, dormers, and details on it. I was 4. Yes, as my cousin was pointing out, I also knew anatomy, apparently, because my mother was a nurse. So they said, do this little pin-up cowboy and draw him like a man. Little cowboy like a man. She didn't say that, the nursery school teacher didn't say to put clothes on him. So the little man had balls and a butthole and nipples. And he looked like a man with his balls. And then nowadays, if a 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid drew like a naked person and put it like on something, they think the parents were perverted and like send me off to like a special place somewhere. But back in 1975, they chuckled about it and said, "Mrs. Brown, are you by chance a nurse or something?" Goes, "Look what Adam drew." "Yeah, I'm a nurse." It's a good thing he knows where all the anatomy parts are.
Yeah, speaking of like budding artistic endeavors, they knew I was kind of an odd duck when in grade school. I think it was the 3rd grade. It was a school field trip for a Christmas production downtown of the Nutcracker, the ballet. And then the next day after we came back from seeing the Nutcracker, our assignment in class was get a big piece of construction paper and some crayons or felt tip or whatever, and draw your favorite scene from the ballet. Oh, no. And I drew... it was the fight between the Rat King and the Nutcracker and his armies, or both of their armies were clashing. And to make it more exciting, I had dismemberment, I had disembowelings, I had blood spraying in arterial jets. I had the Rat King was not only being disemboweled, but he was still capable of using his sword, which he was sticking into the Nutcracker guy. The Nutcracker guy had this little panel open on his chest, and there was a laser gun coming out of it that was blasting another rat guy and setting him on fire. And then behind him, there was like one of the Nutcracker guy's heads flying through the air. So, and none of this was actually in the ballet, I hasten to add. I don't know where I got the ray gun from, but I remember my parents actually got a call about that. They were concerned. They thought maybe I was going a little off the deep end there. I just thought, you know what, this is what it should have been. The Nutcracker would be way cooler if it had ray guns and disembowelings. And I don't think I'm alone in that assessment. But yeah, our early art projects can show a lot about us. Like, again, it's the same stuff we were doing with the Massacre in a Mall stories. Is like, I didn't mean like I really wanted to see people get hacked up and disemboweled. I hate the sight of blood in real life. But if it's fake, it's awesome. It makes me laugh. So it's yeah. I mean, any ballet or opera, I think, could be improved with copious amounts of splatter and whatnot.
That reminds me of the time when, like I was when we first met, and I was in Steve Clark's class, and the first couple days that we had encountered each other, and like okay, since John was in junior high and I was in high school, so yeah, but I was really immature, and I mean really super immature, and they actually at Pine Hill they allowed us to put our Transformer toys in the self class up on a wall, up on this cabinet. Just put the toys on display. No other school in the universe would do that, but they let us do that. So me and my other friends Tim and Jim had our toys up there, and we were literally like having our. But I was in the. I had been in Steve Clark's class. It was my first official class out of the self class. I was in the special class for the really bizarre kids, and where we were making pictures of Megatron from the Transformers blowing the teacher away and the school. Like I was doing this, and this is back when it was 1983, and no one would think anything of pre-Columbine. No one would think anything of the giant 50-foot robot blowing the school up. No one would think. We didn't have the technology or the skill, and we wouldn't have blown up the school. We were just thinking, wouldn't it be funny if there was a giant 50-foot tall robot doing the Godzilla thing on the school? Yeah, we wouldn't have to do homework. Or Godzilla Triptychon goes, wah, and it crushes everybody. It was funny. So I was drawing little cartoony, thinking of gross stuff, and then finally Steve Clark, he says, well, it's time to start class and whatever, and I was doodling and stuff, and they called roll call or name call or whatever, and they got to me. I was just screwing around, and then they got to you because you're Jaeger, so it's last almost, and then Aaron Taubman bursts out like Chuck Yeager, and you got really mad, and you looked at red face, and oh no, oh Chuck Yeager, not really to him. And then it was all. I think this guy is cool. He didn't like chicks. That's funny. So I went over to this guy, and you were kind of mousy in the corner, and you weren't really doing anything. And I said, "You know what, John? I'm blowing up stuff, guns. And you know what's funny? My favorite word is decimate." and then I'm going to draw this painting of the saucer section of the Enterprise being decimated. And when I drew it and I showed it to you,
the word decimated, when it first came up, I pretty much laughed nonstop for 10 minutes. The fact that he knew to use that word in that context just automatically, it was just okay, this guy's cool. Yeah. And I think we spent that first lunch break talking about destroying Teddy Ruxpin dolls. So and from there it was just kind of okay, I think I'll fit in at this school. Honestly though, I remember having that snarky response to the Chuck Yeager question. I don't remember why I had that reaction, other than that I was talk about immature. I was just so introverted and had a chip on my shoulder and mousy and Aaron Taubman was kind of a dick anyway, but. Yeah, I did. I actually ran into more school bullies at Pine Hill than I did at my other school was Leva. I just sort of disappeared in the background there. But yeah, and Adam got bullied more before he went to Pine Hill. Because actually, weirdly enough, at Pine Hill, at least by the time we left, we were actually kind of the cool kids, which is weird because. We're not really the cool kids. We're the nerdy kids. But it was just it was Pine Hill. Well, look at the competition. And here's our infamous credits done on early character generator. Yeah, 2005. That's prehistoric. Yeah, well, the original credits, weren't they just on paper or something?
And then they were on the Apple.
And then they were on the Apple. Yeah, those were ancient.
And then they were on the later one with Jurassic Park.
Oh, and the later ones. Yeah, talk about inappropriate music. For whatever reason, we thought it would be more exciting to put Jurassic Park music over this. And I can guarantee you do not want to use exciting symphonic music when your movie looks like it was shot on a camcorder. Even the people who made the movie will want to stop watching the movie and put on Jurassic Park instead. It doesn't work.
Well, it's brilliant. There's about a half hour of little extras, and we'll talk over the extras because it's funny. But yeah, so it's so it was bizarre. It's like I remember when I was bullied more before Pine Hill. Then I went to junior high at Pine Hill in the 7th grade because at my 7th grade they had this dumb idea about holding some kids back in the 7th grade at Senate after they transferred them from Murphy. I should have been at Rancho, but they held me back at Senate. So all of the Rancho kids held it against me that I was still in grammar school. So they held out there mercilessly like, ha, 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 let's get him, including the mastermind of the bullies who stared me down in the office, and then I didn't want to tell on him. So at Pine Hill, when I was going to go on to Pine Hill, and my sister had already been to junior high, she was going to high school, and she said, okay, when you get to Pine Hill, find the craziest person, the stonedest person, and the biggest person that's there, and befriend them. And that way, no one will mess with you, because either one of them will get the bullies. It's like her friend Candy and her crazy friend and her wacko friend that turned out to be gay. But it's just perfectly all right. And so I first of all I encountered the stoner rebel Angie Tyson, and then Sean McKnight, who was a big guy, and then later I knew a John Williams who was a big guy, but then he'd moved, and so then it was Sean McKnight, and then replaced Sean McKnight was Tim Cantrell, and he was a big kid even then, but he used an asthma machine because they didn't have the breath thing back then. But he was a big guy. He was one of the bigger guys there. So I figured I'd get to know Tim. No one will mess with me because by the time Tim is like 15, he's going to be the size of a bear, and no one's going to mess with him because he'll just, say, hey, I miss you too. Oh, and it's kind of the deal that happened. And then like Jim came along in January of '86, and he was crazy. So there you go, Jim Buffkin. He was the oldest among us, but the craziest. And then and John came around last in that one group, and then there was Henry and Chris and the other ones. But yeah, so that's what happened.
For the record, I was not the stoner. Yeah, Angie was the stoner. Yeah, I'm not sure what niche I fit into, other than just I was a similarly weird person. I was kind of like the backup Adam. But just to point out, like, Adam's strategy is awesome, but it doesn't work if the people that you're, trying to be. Martha's strategy doesn't work if the people that you're looking to befriend are actually jerks or that you don't like them or whatever. Fortunately, Tim is actually a nice guy and just genuinely friendly. So it's so it's like it just sort of worked out that way. Like, I didn't know Tim at all except through Adam. But mostly through making this movie, we just sort of like hung out and talked and was like, oh yeah, you're a cool guy. I knew him at Pine Hill a little bit. I remember mostly he wore sweats a lot, and yeah, pretty big guy. It's a compliment, Tim. It's a compliment. Ooh. But so yeah, here's some 2005. Interview footage where I'm probably trying to explain in this footage why we filmed everything so gibberish. I probably didn't understand it then any more than I do now. Actually I seem just as baffled describing it as it's just God, it's like I'm looking at myself just from 7 years ago and I still look like a little kid. I look at myself now, it's like, oh God. But it just makes me think, like, I should film myself now, and in 7 years I'll be like, oh my God, I look so young. I'm so thin. I've only got 2 chins. And there's my old-style glasses. I no longer have those. And that's actually one thing that I noticed watching this movie. I was playing Henderson and Clark in the 2005 footage with my glasses on. And in the older footage, they're not wearing those. And not only that, but they're wearing the same damn glasses. So why suddenly both of them are wearing the same round glasses? I don't know. Just similar lack of attention to detail. But considering that it was footage shot for this movie, it's kind of appropriate.
Yeah.
Excellent. Just in time for the coffin.
Yeah, just in time. Diddy Crane. So it's like, yeah, well, it did work in our case because, like, with the crazy characters, because Tim was a nice guy, and also because we got a little cleverer as we went on, and we learned the lingo of Pine Hill and how to defeat the bullies, even ourselves. Because I had been in room 10 after Steve Clark's class, and room 10 was even worse, and they were constantly punking me all the time. And so by the time Callum McGowan showed up, "Ooh, I'm an awesome guy," or like Jamie or whatever, they came a little. It's like, okay, these guys are nothing. I can even defeat them. And then there was that annoying Greg Carr guy, and Tim wanted to defeat him. Then Scott Summers wanted, and it's like boo, and like. I remember this one time Greg Carr was claiming he was a black belt. He's going to beat me up or something. Dang it! And yeah, hold on.
Take a little break from that. So we'll get back to that story. Holy smokes. Yeah, I got a little coughing jag going on there. But, yeah, there was a surprisingly large amount of bullies at Pine Hill until you realize that, like, a lot of the kids there were there because they were troubled and messed up, and those are the kind of kids who become bullies. So the strategy was to either be tougher and bigger than them, like Tim was, or, in our case, to be cleverer and weirder and not present ourselves as viable targets. So I took some bullying in my first year there, but not so much in later years, except for the aforementioned Jamie guy, who went through this phase where he thought it would be hilarious to spend every day after school hitting me with a stick or pushing me in the creek. And then he would run home and complain to his mom that I was being mean to him, and she would, like, show up and be all pissed off at me and my mom for being horrible people. Jamie is now divorced and living with his parents, as far as I know. So, yeah, little karma. Hmm? No, that was the last I heard. And the thing is, I haven't bothered to find any. Yeah, twice he had a kid. My mom ran into him in a store and said, "So how old is your kid?" And he didn't know how old his own kid was. So, like, yeah, it's like, I don't understand. I didn't sleep with my wife for like 2 years, and there's a kid. But yeah, that's. So that's karma, and we could totally talk smack about him here because the odds of him or anybody that we knew from those days listening to this commentary are virtually zero. He said naively.
I'm not gonna let him. It's probably not going on YouTube. No. But it's like yeah, it's like I was saying about Greg Carr, and there was this crazy days out in front of the bus stop and whatever. God dang it! And like there was this other times like on the campus and whatever, and they have like Greg was all being all tough guy, ooh, we beat you up, ooh. And like Tim was standing like next to me, and he's all like, and I was all like, okay, Greg, let's fight right now. Yeah. And I had like a yellow belt and something, but he thought he was a black belt ninja. And then like Tim crossed his arms and he said, "Yeah, you touch him, I touch you, real good." And then he kind of put his hand in his fist and went, "Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do." Tim was like half kidding, but only half. He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna make a pretzel out of you, because even if you claim to be a black belt, I'm gonna take you out." It's like, no, they were going to take him out. They were going to. Greg sucked. And then only a few days later, the guy gets beat up by a girl. So that proves how awesome Greg Carr's black belt skills were. That Libby ran up to him and said, "I'm going to kick you in the balls!" And he's all, "I dare you to kick me in the balls!" He's like, "Okay!" Boink! And Tim's all, "You got beat up by a girl."
Oh, no. Granted, I'll say this for, Libby would scare anybody because she was a completely crazy psycho hose bitch. But her and her sister both, maybe they're very nice people now if they're still around. We don't know. But at the time, they were at Pine Hill. They were infamous for being the craziest of the crazy. And I do recall one infamous incident wherein I was outside of Val's office, who was the disciplinarian, because I'd gotten in trouble. That was my year for getting severes, which was kind of like a citation. This was my sophomore year. My last year of junior high. And so I was outside of Val's office, and and there comes Libby, and I don't know why she wasn't in class, but she was talking to one of the other counselors, Lisa Dunbar, and there was this payphone on campus. This was in the era of the payphone, and it was about 20 yards away, and Libby is like really, really upset, and she keeps trying to use the phone, like she's going to use the payphone to call her mom, who is going to apparently be persuaded to come pick her up from school because she's having a hissy fit or something. And Lisa keeps taking the phone out of her hand and hanging it back up. And then Libby would keep picking, and she's like, I'm calling my mom! I'm going to call my mom! She's going to come get me away from this school! And Lisa just keeps calmly taking it out of her hand and hanging it back up. This happens about 5 times, and finally Libby slams the phone and goes, damn it, Lisa, you bitch! And she slams the phone and she starts storming away, and she's like huffing and just, I'm going home. And she must have realized that's ridiculous, because there was no way she was going to walk home from Pine Hill, because she stopped at the gate and just sort of stood there like huffing and puffing, crossed her arms for about a minute, and Lisa just sort of was still standing there by the phone, just sort of looking at her with this bemused sort of like, kind of look on her face. And I just knew, oh, this story is gold. I can't wait to spread this all over the school. It was awful of me and horrible, I know. But you know what? That was Pine Hill. And, the blooper reel. Awesome. From 92 and 93, which if you think about it, the original cut of the movie was basically one giant blooper reel. Although if you've seen some of the outtakes, you'll see that what ended up not making it in was actually quite a bit more inept. We had such a time getting Sarah's. I'd never played a girl before, so and I had no idea. I was kind of playing it like Divine for a little bit of it. And
yeah, we make constant references to in these bloopers and outtakes to other movies. At one point, Sarah, or here the John Waters, she isn't really Sarah, but Sarah, she screams out into goes, Georgina, you bitch! No, that's from The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. That's from a movie that we'd seen where this evil cook guy is running a restaurant, and he's like psychotic, and apparently he's abusing his wife, and he decides, this is the kind of stuff we watched when we were like 20, art house sex, when we were 20 or so, and in John Waters movies. So we reference John Waters movies too. We're all like, like Divine or whatever, like that. And for some reason, we thought that when Azloth said, "I had a chicken once," we thought that they would somehow read our minds and know that we'd seen the chicken porking scene in one of John Waters' movies. I believe it was Pink Flamingos. And that somehow people would see that scene in our heads somehow in the film. Again, my God, you watched a movie with chickens fucking in it. So we have to say chicken screw. So we have to say deep fried. To throw that in there, deep fried. Well, or that we'd seen somebody screwing a chicken. And I was like, no, they wouldn't have even implied that or inferred that, because he just says, I had a chicken once. We had pet chicken. I don't know. But for some reason, we really didn't want any double entendres in this, which is weird because Sarah and the other one are Kimchi are very clearly a sort of a drag parody of like gender, if nothing else.
Plus, there's still plenty of risque humor in here. I mean, it's all PG-13 as far as I'm concerned, but there's an F-bomb in there. But yeah, we were sort of notorious, and maybe this was just because it was kind of insular at Pine Hill, and we were at that age where we just sort of assumed the world revolved around us. But yeah, we sort of constantly would assume that the other person that we were talking to knew what we were thinking. And some of our early scripts had all these weird-ass in-jokes. Like, I would put them in like references to these obscure horror movies that I and nobody else, probably for 20 years, had ever seen. and well, no, that's not going to happen now. But like, I would put in references to some Italian zombie movie and I would just sort of assume that like somehow people would get the quote. And Adam did the same thing to me. He was talking a lot about Star Trek: The Next Generation, which I hadn't seen, and I don't know if it ever actually occurred to me to say that I hadn't seen it. But he was talking about it, just sort of the implicit assumption that, well, who isn't watching? And I was just probably just sort of nodding along, going, yeah, Picard, sure. And at one point, I attempted to write a spoof Star Trek: The Next Generation story without ever having seen it. And it was virtually the entire thing was based on my image of the show that I had built from things that Adam had said. And I didn't know that it wasn't set at the same time as Kirk's time. So I had Kirk and Picard on the bridge at the same time. And McCoy was in there, as some kind of Jedi Masters. I don't remember what I was thinking, but it's easily one of the weirdest things I ever wrote because I had no concept of what in the hell. Oh, it was Shades of Pink, which was not only that, but it was a slash story. And it had some fair... it might have been LaForge Whales. Yeah, LaForge Whales not preceded Shades of Pink was actually... I had been watching the show at that point, and I sort of knew what the characters were. But LaForge Whales not... I had no idea who these characters were, half of them. So I just sort of made it up. Yeah, there was a sketch in there about a parrot. Kirk is in there, and he bangs this bird chick from Alterius 4 or whatever and gets... herpes simplex 87, which is chirpies.
and then there was a scene where Yar has sex with a lizard called Esto. It basically sounds like Azloth, but he's a big lizard. Proto-Azloth, but he was a lizard. He was a Terrellian. Now that's an interesting a Lemurian Terrellian. That's an another maelstrom thing. And now they're called the Tamarellians. But that's another weird-ass Star Trek thing. The reason we thought people could read our minds is because this shit was showing up. This stuff was showing up on TV shows. And we had thought of it 2 days ago, And it was like, we're like, I remember there was an episode of, I remember you were mentioning the Terrellians. And I said, there was a Next Generation episode with Terrellians on it. They were this plague ship. And then you saw that episode later on, and you're like, oh my God, no! And then later on, the Terrellians show up as another alien race. It's completely different. And then another one, and then on Voyager, it was another alien race. So they kept using the name Terrellian. I think what it was is they saw Star Trek 2, and they were thinking that character Terrell, that would sound interesting as an alien race. So they just kept using it over and over. So if you go on the Star Trek, like their little Star Trek wiki site, and look up Terrellian, you'll get 5 different alien names spelled a little differently for different races. And like you had to change the name Terrellian to we did not steal it from Star Trek.
No, actually, they're the Termarillians now, which I think sounds a little better anyway. But the EN is very Star Trek-y. But I also think it's because Terrellian it's such a quick fix. If you're writing a science fiction script and it's got to be due in like 3 days and you need an alien name, there's certain names that just sound like quick and easy names. Unobtainium. But if there were the Paznakians, yeah, sure, nobody else has probably ever used that because it sounds bad and it's clunky, and you don't want Picard talking about all the Paznakians are, it's just the Terrellians because it just rolls off the tongue better. And that's probably where I got it from too. I thought, this is such a cool science fiction-y sounding name. But unlike in Star Trek, mine were these giant sort of alligatory lizard people. And Jim said something about up the ass, which, considering how homophobic he was at the time, that's kind of funny. And this was where you kept Raxler of fuck, the planet fuck. Now there's a science fiction name, the Fuckians. But you kept stealing Tim's line here because I think you were just getting so excited you want to do both of them. Or something. You kept saying, that's my line. But yeah, I think this was probably his best performance from back in those days. He really liked that character, he was comfortable. Maybe because he got to sit on the couch, and yeah, he's not looking at the camera, and we weren't asking him to bury his face in a plate of spaghetti. Which that, if you remember from the movie, there's a scene where he kind of goes like, yeah. He's supposed to burp and then fall into a plate of spaghetti, and it was going to be like blue spaghetti. We were all ambitious in the script, but in real life, he wouldn't do it. He's like, oh, I don't want to put my face in food. That's stupid. And so the best compromise we could come up with is he burps and falls onto a paper plate with a slice of Wonder Bread on it, which is, it's not like you can see it anyway, but it really would have been a good gag. We couldn't convince him to do it for art. But and there's the script, which does make, I think, a cameo appearance in the finished film. You can sort of see it on the couch a few times. If we had not been reading off of that script, we would still be filming to this day. That script saved our hash.
Yeah, we went on to do lots of other Transformer things and other things. We did that for 9 years, did a Transformers parody thing, which we can't release because of copyrighted songs on it. And characters, of course. But I think we can get away with it with Chimera because it's not going to have copyrighted songs, and it'll be free. And the soundtrack here on this was done here in our studio. It's a Calcat original with a little bit of Marlowe Fuck You thrown in there. And it's just really cool. And we threw the Twin Peaksy sounding theme music, which was our intent during the credits. And I think it really added something to have music in it. And to have good music that wasn't from somewhere else and you wouldn't recognize it. And as I said on the other commentaries, yeah, I went on to I'm really prolific. I can write I probably write if I just say 26 episodes a year or something, that doesn't make sense. Let's just say I can write a novel about 200 pages in a year. I can put out a novel. It's about 200 pages long in 1 year, and that's it. That makes sense. 200 pages, 150, 200 pages. I can put out a full novel from beginning to end. If I just go up here and never come out for like a year, I can do it. And I can come up with the whole story and all the background and everything. And I've been editing and re-editing and rehashing my old stuff for years. There's 6 seasons of Distant Destinies, which are now 6 books. There's Starcrackers, it's got like 5. And we also did scripts for when it was usable, Star Trek The Next Generation. Well, we did a Next Generation one, but I didn't like it, so I never submitted it. So I later rewrote it as a Starcrackers episode. And then wrote a Deep Space Nine one that was loosely based on the Next Gen one called Fearful Symmetry, of which later on Pocketbook stole the title for another book. But Fearful Symmetry was stolen from Blake, so why not? I knew where I was stealing it from. I mean, why not steal a title from someone cool like Blake? You know. So like the works of Blake. Yes, So yeah, and that was from Silence of the Lambs too. But anyway, so let's steal from Blake. I wrote. John and I collaborated on a Deep Space Nine episode when it was early on, and it was only rejected because they wanted to do something else with the aliens that we had addressed in the story. Then I wrote a Voyager one, literally 6 months later, put it on Voyager, and they didn't use that one because there were too many episodes of another alien race, of Tuvok and his thing. And it's like we weren't rejected because of content or Mary Sue or writing a story about just us, like this was kind of. It was more about like timing issues or plot that we didn't know about. So they encouraged us to keep writing, and I was keeping writing anyway. I've been writing ever since and never stopped, and working on other stuff all the time, and can think of like other new science fiction stories as well, and hope to get some of those actually legitimately really, really published. It was really awesome when I published my grandmother's novel in 2004, and then was able to self-publish Distant Destinies in 2008. The sequel, The Todimus Legacy, due out in 2013 probably, or maybe late 2012. Who knows? It might be out earlier than that. See, whenever it goes in, it comes out. So you got to make sure it's absolutely perfect before it goes in, though, because otherwise, if there's something wrong in it, it's out there, screwed. You know.
And it costs like $20 to like put a corrected galley out. But probably more than that. But self-publishing is not like the stigma that it used to be like in the 70s when it was like, I self-published my manifesto on why I'm awesome or whatever. It's like a lot of people go from self-publishing to actual, publishing houses. Look at the kid who wrote those dragon books. What were they called? Aragon. I think we're out of. We're done.